In a small Amish garden outside New Holland, Pennsylvania, a 7-year-old boy cuts his hand on a piece of barn metal. He runs to his grandmother. She does not reach for a tube of antiseptic. She does not get the car keys. She walks 3 steps onto her own lawn, bends down, picks a single small green leaf from a plant most people would call a weed, crushes it between her fingers and presses it against the cut. The bleeding stops within a minute. The boy goes back to his chores. The grandmother did not invent this. Her own grandmother showed her how to do it. The grandmother before that learned it from a woman who arrived in Pennsylvania in 1742, and the woman before that learned it from a tradition that, when you actually trace it, goes back 5,000 years. The plant is growing in your yard right now. It is probably growing in 3 or 4 places. You have walked over it today. You have mowed over it this summer. You may have pulled it out and thrown it in the compost without ever knowing what it was. It does not have a beautiful flower. It does not have a name most people would recognize. It is so common, so ordinary, so completely overlooked that the United States Department of Agriculture officially classifies it as a weed. It is also, according to laboratory studies published in peer-reviewed journals, one of the most effective topical wound healing plants ever identified by science. By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly what the plant looks like, where it grows, how to identify it in your own yard tonight, the specific compounds inside it that close wounds and stop infections, and the historical trail that connects the Amish grandmother in New Holland to ancient Mesopotamian healers in 3000 BC who pressed the exact same leaf onto the exact same kinds of wounds. You are also going to know why every culture on Earth that ever encountered this plant came to the same conclusion about it completely independently, across thousands of years, on 3 different continents. But to understand any of that, you have to start with the leaf. The plant is called broadleaf plantain. Its scientific name is Plantago major. It is not the banana fruit also called plantain. It has nothing to do with bananas. The naming overlap is one of the reasons the medicinal version has almost completely disappeared from common knowledge in America. When you say plantain, people think of fried banana chips. They do not think of the small oval-leaved plant in their driveway. Here is how you identify it. Look for a low, flat plant growing close to the ground. The leaves are oval, smooth on the edges, with 5 to 7 parallel veins running from the base of the leaf to the tip. These veins are the giveaway. Most leaves have branching, tree-like vein patterns. Plantain leaves have straight, parallel lines, almost like the strings of a guitar. The plant forms a small rosette of leaves lying flat on the soil. In the summer, it sends up a thin stalk topped with tiny greenish flowers, like a miniature cattail. It loves compacted soil. It grows where almost nothing else will. Sidewalk cracks, the edge of a driveway, footpaths, fence lines, the strip between the road and the curb. The Native Americans, when they first saw European settlers arriving in North America, noticed something strange. This plant appeared wherever the settlers had walked. It had not been there before they arrived. It seemed to follow them. So the indigenous tribes gave the plant a name. They called it white man's footprint. That is documented in colonial-era botanical records. The plant was not native to North America. It came over with European immigration, in seed form, in the soil of boots and wagon wheels, and it spread along every colonial path. Within 50 years of contact, it was growing on both sides of the continent. The Native Americans, who had no reason to trust anything the settlers brought, looked at the plant carefully, identified its uses, and added it to their own medicine. The Navajo used the root as what they called life medicine. The Kiowa tied bundles of it around their heads as a symbol of health. That is not a small thing. That is a culture in active conflict with another culture, looking at a plant that arrived with their enemies and deciding within a generation that it was so useful they would adopt it into their own healing tradition. That kind of cross-cultural convergence does not happen for plants that do not work. And the Native Americans were not the first to figure this out. They were just the most recent. Around 3000 BC, in the Mesopotamian floodplains, healers documented a practice of pressing crushed leaves of plantago onto wounds and insect bites. This is recorded in archaeological reconstructions of ancient Mesopotamian medical practice. The same plant, the same use. 5,000 years ago, a few thousand years later, in Greece, the philosopher Aristotle wrote about plantain. He documented its use for bleeding, for childbirth, for inflammation. A few hundred years after that, the Greek physician Dioscorides, who wrote the most influential medical book in Western history, included plantain in De Materia Medica. That book was used continuously by European doctors for the next 1500 years. Every medical school in Europe taught it. Every herbalist memorized it. And in it, plantain was the standard remedy for cuts, bruises, and minor wounds. Then, in the late 1500s, William Shakespeare put it in his plays. 3 different plays. In Romeo and Juliet, when Benvolio offers Romeo advice for a wound, Romeo replies, with characteristic teenage sarcasm, "Your plantain leaf is excellent for that." For a broken shin, Shakespeare expected his entire audience, from the cheapest seats to the queen, to understand the joke. That is how common the knowledge was in 1595. The Amish, when they arrived in Pennsylvania in the 1720s and 1730s, did not need to be taught about plantain. They already knew. Their European ancestors had been using it for hundreds of years. In Scandinavia, the plant was called growblad, which translates literally to healing leaf, and it is still called that today. And here is what makes this story almost unbelievable when you stop and think about it. You have Mesopotamian healers in 3000 BC. You have Aristotle and Dioscorides in ancient Greece. You have medieval European apothecaries. You have Shakespeare in Elizabethan England. You have German herbalists in the 1700s. You have Pennsylvania Amish farmers in the 1740s. You have Navajo and Kiowa healers in the 1800s. You have Welsh grandmothers in the 1900s. You have Chinese traditional medicine practitioners using the same genus for 2000 years under the name Zhejiangzhao. All of these people, across 3 continents, across 5,000 years, none of them in contact with each other, all looking at the same small, ordinary, easily overlooked plant, all independently arriving at the same conclusion, that it works on wounds. That is the kind of pattern in the world of ethnobotany that scientists describe with a specific phrase. They call it a signal worth investigating. When every human culture that ever found a particular plant arrived at the same use for it, completely independently, there is almost certainly something real happening at the molecular level. So in the 20th century, researchers started looking. In the year 2000, a major review was published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology by a researcher named A.B. Samuelson at the School of Pharmacy at the University of Oslo. The review summarized over 100 years of scientific work on Plantago major. The conclusion stated that plantain extract has, and I am quoting directly from the abstract, a wide range of biological effects, including wound healing, anti-inflammatory, analgesic, antioxidant, antibiotic, and immunomodulating activity. Notice what that sentence does not say. It does not say the Amish belief. It does not say in folk tradition. It says biological effects. That is the language of measured science. A few years later, in 2021, another peer-reviewed study was published in a major scientific journal, looking specifically at wound healing in laboratory animals with hyperglycemic conditions, which is to say, animals whose bodies heal poorly because of high blood sugar. The study found that topical application of Plantago major leaf extract significantly accelerated wound closure compared to the control group. The mechanism, the researchers documented, came from 2 specific compounds. Ursolic acid suppresses the inflammation that slows wound healing, and oleanolic acid stimulates the migration of fibroblast cells, the body's own wound closing machinery. Those are not folk medicine terms. Those are mechanisms. The plant is doing something specific and measurable inside the wound. But that is only the beginning of what is in the leaf. Let me give you the short list. Curcumin, an iridoid glycoside that has mild antimicrobial activity and reduces inflammation. allantoin, which the cosmetic industry uses in many of its most expensive skin creams, because it stimulates cell growth and tissue regeneration. Tannins, which are astringent, which means they constrict tissue and slow bleeding. Mucilage, a kind of plant slime that, when crushed, forms a soft protective gel over a wound. Flavonoids, including luteolin and apignin. Plantamagoside, calcium at a concentration of 23,000 parts per million, which is roughly 15 times the calcium concentration in horsetail. The botanist James Duke, who spent decades cataloging the chemical compounds in medicinal plants, listed 39 active chemicals in Plantago major. 39. And 509 distinct biological activities. That is what is happening inside the small green leaf in your driveway. In Germany, the official government regulatory body for herbal medicine, called Commission E, formally endorses plantain for use in treating inflammation, coughs and bronchitis. That is a government medical recommendation, not a folk tradition, not a homestead blog, a federal endorsement in one of the world's most regulated medical systems. Now you might be wondering how the Amish actually use this. The answer is simple, because the Amish themselves are simple in their preparation. The traditional Amish method is called a poultice. You pick 3 or 4 fresh leaves from a plant growing in clean soil, away from the road. You rinse them under cold water. You crush them between your fingers or in a clean mortar until they release their green juice. You press the crushed leaves directly onto the wound, cover it with a clean cloth, and replace the leaves every 3 or 4 hours. The bleeding slows. The swelling reduces. Insect sting itching subsides within minutes. For storage, Amish women dry the leaves in summer when the active compounds are at their highest concentration, then crumble them into a glass jar. In winter, when no fresh plant is available, the dried leaves are mixed with warm water into a green paste and applied the same way. There is a more concentrated version called a salvo. You take a half cup of dried plantain leaves, cover them with olive oil in a glass jar, and let the jar sit in a warm window for 4 to 6 weeks. Then you strain the oil, warm it gently, and stir in beeswax until it cools into a soft balm. That balm, kept in a small tin, will last a year. The Amish keep it in their kitchen drawer next to the matches and the candle stubs. The whole thing, the leaf, the salve, the knowledge, costs nothing. The plant grows free. The olive oil is in your pantry. The beeswax can be ordered for a few dollars. The bandage is whatever clean cloth you have. The Amish have not paid for an over-the-counter antibiotic ointment in 200 years. Not because they are anti-medicine, not because they reject science, because they have, growing in their garden, a plant that closes wounds and reduces inflammation, that contains 39 documented active compounds, that has been used continuously by every culture on 3 continents for 5,000 years. And here is the part that should stop you in your tracks. That plant is also growing in your yard, right now. Tonight, when this video ends, you can walk outside, look at the edges of your lawn, look at the cracks in your driveway, look at the strip of grass next to your sidewalk, and you will find it. Probably in 3 or 4 places. You have been walking past your own pharmacy your entire life. This is the real lost knowledge, not buried scrolls, not secret formulas, not government conspiracies, just a small green plant that the modern world stopped looking at when it started buying antibiotic ointment in plastic tubes for $9 at the drugstore. The Amish kept looking at the plant. The Native Americans kept looking at the plant. The Welsh grandmothers and the Scandinavian farmers and the Chinese herbalists kept looking at the plant. Everyone except modern Americans who walked past it on the way into Walgreens for a tube of something with a brand name and a marketing budget. The leaf is free. The science is real. The history is 5,000 years deep. The Amish have been using it the entire time. If you found this fascinating, please hit subscribe for more stories like this.